sound of this V8 that is just unbelievable. It's emotional, it's romantic in this car, because when you get above 5,000 RPMs and head towards 7,000 where it makes all 380 horsepower, it comes alive and you want to be up there all the time. Oh, that is awesome. This is one of the best sounding engines ever created. I'm currently in a 2007 Aston Martin V8 Vantage. One of the most beautiful and best sounding cars ever made. And Aston created this car to go after a very popular car known as the Porsche 911. At the time, this car, brand new, was roughly starting around $110,000, right around where the Porsche 911 was. Specs-wise, similar speed, 0 to 60 just under 5 seconds, very similar to the Porsche 911. 380 horsepower, roughly 300 pound-feet of torque from a 4.3 liter V8. But that's kind of where the similarities end, because it's the sound of the V8 in this car that just completely separates it from the experience of a 911. And that's what got so many people to buy this Aston Martin, is that it was such a departure from what you'd be offered in a 911. It was so unique. The noise, the sound, it just was different. So many people bought it, they sold 10,000 of these in the first 3 years, which was a new record for Aston Martin. And that's where this really separates itself in who is that buyer, right? Because at the time, buying a Porsche 911 was the go-to sports car and still is. But you bought this because you just wanted to be a little bit different. You didn't want to have what everyone had on the block when they went out and bought that sports car. Let's talk about who that buyer maybe was back in those first 3 years when they sold 10,000 of these. Well, when you looked at the 911, it was the go-to sports car and still is the go-to sports car for enthusiasts out there who want just something that they know is going to be great. And that's why it was such a leap for Aston Martin to enter that market, to try and go up against such a dominant force. And the buyers who went after this, you have to imagine, were just thinking about trying to be unique. They didn't want to have the same car that everyone on the block had, right? You wanted something just a little different, something that said, you know, I think a little bit outside the box. That is what the Aston Martin V8 Vantage offered to that buyer. Who's the most famous, cool person to drive an Aston Martin? James Bond. Yep, we know, it's very cliche. But there's no doubting. You pick this over a 911, you are cooler. You're definitely cooler. Right now, these cars are going for around $40,000 to $50,000. And for that, you get a car that easily looks like the $100,000 it was new plus. It looks like a $150,000 car. It's a beautiful car, and then it makes this noise. So what's it like to drive? Well, that's where it maybe lends itself to being a little bit behind the 911 it went after. It's a bit more sluggish in the steering. It feels a little bit lethargic in the corners at times. There's just a feel that it's not as pointed. It doesn't want to dance through a corner. You don't feel like it wants to be chucked around at all. And that's what makes the 911 so much fun, is it does those things. This doesn't. This feels a little bit more like a Grand Tour, like it wants to be put on a highway, set in 5th or 6th gear, blast along at 90 miles an hour. And you feel it. You feel that weight. It just doesn't quite have the thoroughbred feel that you would have on a 911. It doesn't feel at home on a racetrack. You just sense it doesn't want to be doing these things, going through corners at high speed, but what it does want to do is transport you in a fun, exciting way from point A to point B. There's no doubt about that. You can't talk about this era of Aston Martin without getting into a little bit of the ownership structure of the company at the time, because at the time, Aston Martin was owned by Ford, which also owned Volvo. And so throughout this car and in certain areas, you may find those Volvo Ford parts. But I don't think that's a drawback in a lot of ways, because they've wrapped it in such a stunning body, and they've obviously put tons of thought into the interior and the things that you touch and feel and look at. That, yes, the key fob is the same as a Volvo. Who cares? I never looked at a key fob and let that decide whether or not I like the car, whether I like driving it. And last I checked, once I put the keys in the ignition, I never looked at it ever again. Immediately from the outside, you can see why so many people bought these. It is one of the most beautiful cars ever made. And it starts with the long nose, to the short deck, and the sloping lines that are so classic Aston Martin or Jaguar. It's muscular, yet elegant. It's like putting me in a tuxedo. Sort of. But, like me in a tuxedo, it's not without its flaws. So this one isn't so much a flaw as much as it's a feature. It has to do with the doors. So you open it here, this handle, and then they go up. Now, this is intended to avoid hitting curbs, which I appreciate, but this being a very nice Aston Martin Vantage and the struts being new, it stays in position. But when they go bad, this heavy door doesn't stay in every position, and eventually, that would hurt. I wouldn't like that. So this flaw will take a little bit of your imagination to be able to see, but it involves the rear trunk. And basically, you open it with this, which I love that button. But when you go up, you have to imagine this. If this was wet and there was water collected back here, it flows into the trunk, ruining anything that you have back here. So basically, the message is do not drive these in the rain, or never put anything in the back in the rain. So once you're inside, there's another oddity that has to do with the handbrake. And it's located there because Aston Martin didn't want to clutter the center console with a handbrake where it's already pretty compact over there. So the reason it's odd is, well, to activate it, you pull it up like anything else. But if it stayed there, well, how would you get out? You'd be locked in. What it does is go back down while staying activated. Now, you want to release it. It's a whole other story. You then pull it back up, press the button, and put it down. So you have to pull it up to then put it back down and release the handbrake. It's a little bit odd. Now, once you're inside though, it's basically flawless. And immediately, the thing that catches your attention on the interior is the gauges. They are simply a work of art. They look like a high-end watch, like a, well, Breitling watch maybe. But they're just beautiful to look at. And that's how this interior is laid out all the way throughout. It's just a beautiful design, it's beautiful materials. They really made it a pleasant place to be on the interior. And it gives it that true Aston Martin elegance from every position, every angle. Now, if you are buying one of these, there is a couple things you should pay attention to. That is, up here on the dash, the leather right below the windshield can shrink up. Also on the binnacle, right at the edges, that leather can shrink up. And then on 06 models, pay attention to the seats, because the leather where you'd sit at the bottom, that can get baggy. On later models, that went away because they changed the stitching. The mid-2000s was sort of a golden era for manual sports cars, if you think about it, because it was sort of the last era of true analog sports cars. You know, it was right in between the cassette players of, you know, the early 90s cars that were very mechanical, very analog, and eventually what came after it, the iPod streaming era of cars, right, where a lot of technology and electronics got involved. This era right here in the mid-2000s, you sense the analog feel. You sense the mechanicalness behind every action. It's sensing the steering, through the brakes, through the shifter. It just feels like you're really integral to the car, to being able to drive it. And that's why if you are looking currently at getting a manual sports car and you don't want the 997 or 996, 911, but you want to spend around that same price and get that same performance, but be unique, have something a little bit out of the box, then this is the car you should be looking at, the Aston Martin V8 Vantage. Why do more people not have these? Why are they only $40,000 to $50,000? It's because people don't know. While the V8 Vantage is beloved for its timeless shape and V8 soundtrack, the values of the V8 cars are pretty flat. In 2016, a number 3 car in good condition was valued at $41,000, and today it's down to about $39,000. The good news is, you could drive one for a few years without losing too much money. As always, values change over time, so please go to Hagerty.com/valuation tools in order to get the most detailed and up-to-date information. To sum it up, what you get with one of these nowadays is a car that you're not going to want to drive every day. But when you do, it's going to be a special experience. And I don't know of many cars this day and age at this price range that can truly offer that. That can offer the idea of, you know, I'm just going to reserve that for a Saturday and a Sunday to take out of the garage, have some fun, listen to a cool engine, go somewhere I didn't really need to go, but I'm going to go anyway because it's a far enough drive to enjoy this car. You don't have that in a Porsche 911. It just doesn't give you that. It's a bit more high-strung. This makes you want to take that little longer drive to find that different cheeseburger, wherever it is, on a Saturday or Sunday, and you're going to enjoy it the whole way. But you're not going to want to wake up Monday morning and fire this engine and take it to the office because it's just not what it's for.